Hi, everyone. Welcome to the That's Allowed podcast. I'm your hostess, Dr. Adrienne McKeon. And today, once again, we have the amazing Sierra Melcher. Welcome back, Sierra. Please reintroduce yourself for those who have not seen your gorgeous face before.
Thank you. As always, I think I not struggle with, but just pause with that introduction
Yeah.
because who the hell am I today?
Mhm.
I can tell you what the internet says about me and all of that stuff, but um, I am an educator through and through. Um, I've expressed that in various ways throughout my life. Um, really the core of the mission is to empower women, empower humans to know who they are,
Mhm.
know that they can navigate any obstacles. Life is full of obstacles and should be. And if you're facing an obstacle, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. You're right where you need to be. You're growing, you're learning. So, congratulations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love the way you put things, and that's part of why I love having these conversations with you. It's nothing that I wouldn't have said myself, but you say it so much more beautifully. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Let's just dive right in with the
Okay.
question of what story is the world not getting right now?
So many. Um, I don't think I have the answer for that question. I have like an umbrella
Hmm.
for all the answers to the question. The thing that's been on my heart more, and I thought I knew what I was going to say when I got on here because
You
I like
always
to be
do, but
prepared,
then
maybe, but I never say what I thought. There should be like a bloopers reel for where I actually say what I thought I was going to say. Um, I feel so strongly that so many of us are holding back, that so many voices are like self-enforcing and not sharing because they don't know, because they haven't given themselves the safety to look inwards and figure out whatever they have to say, um, or if they do know, not feeling safe enough that they can say what's so true for them without like unbearable retribution for just
yeah.
being truthful. um, and for 15 years I was a history teacher, and I loved it, and I thought it was really important work and I was good at it. And the more distance I have from standardized curriculum, the more I ache for what I didn't share and how I didn't support my students. Like, I was a damn good teacher. I know that I was great and I supported in a lot of ways, but I still stuck close enough to the curriculum that I feel really, really badly because it's not enough of the story. And even revisionist history and history that like is trying to get the voices that have been silenced throughout the centuries a little bit represented, a day, a year doesn't make up for it. And you know a chapter in a textbook where there's like, oh, and there's other voices, and oh, people of color, it's not the real story. And and I see the causal effect of that, right? When we don't see ourselves in the story, then we keep our voices to ourselves. And women, aren't sufficiently in the story. There's so many voices that don't fit into the tiny little sort of acceptable box, whether it's gender, race, class, any of it.
Hmm.
And and that's the story that's missing, all those voices. um, and for years I've been working on the emotional side, supporting women just to find themselves, because that's where it starts. Um, but as you know, much more recently, I've really been working on the external and the public and the logistic side of once we've sort of navigated our emotional realm to figure out what is our story, what is our voice, what would we say when we have that voice, and all of the tangles of the fear and the doubt and the navigating the emotional part. But then where do we say it? How
How
do
do
we
we
have
say it?
people hear it, right? Like, and this is the the masculine, the feminine, the energetics and the logistics. It's the dichotomies that have to go together
Mhm.
to really change what's missing, which is like the plentitude of voices, the disagreements, the contradictions, the all of the truths that don't fit into one neat little tidy box. The ones that are like, well, how can this and this be true?
Yeah.
Um, and so I've worked and moved into and actually come full circle to being the teacher again in a more traditional sense of really supporting women to find their voice, to practice the writing exercises, to learn to navigate the publishing world because it's not as hard as it used to be. It's still overwhelming and to the point that a lot of people don't do it. But with the emotional support and the logistical support, we can go from, and this is what I'm trying to do, is like change the condition that there are stories that aren't being heard. And we can figure it out internally, and then we can just figure it out externally. And then you can click a button on the internet and get a book from a voice that has never been heard before. And it's too cool. So I'm obviously a little jazzed about that.
Yes, and I'm so glad you are because I definitely wanna talk more about that and what you're doing. But
Yeah.
let's kind of, I don't know if backtrack is the right word, but let's look back now. We've
Yeah.
got the theme of hindsight 2020. And so the
Mm,
pandemic the
yeah.
pandemic hits. How does that affect you and your message?
Um, my first thought is that it was such an incredibly beneficial incubator.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have to couldn't deal with the outside world. I am a single mother. I had all of a sudden a 4, now 5, then 5, and then 6-year-old at home 24/7. And and a lot of the things that I was doing with my time and my energy fell away so easily
Yeah.
because they weren't priorities anymore, or the priorities were so clearly different that I was just like, oh, I don't have to do any of that. And I was fortunate enough to have my mother nearby. And so I carved out 3 hours a day, and that was my work life. And what I wanted to create in that really condensed amount of time, I think I was more productive
Mhm.
because of the sort of the container, the imposed container, and the the realization that so much of my energy had been flitted away on stuff that wasn't essentially important to me. I thought it was. When you have like 8 hours a day, you're like, well, I gotta do something, right? Um, but I sort of went like lean on what I did. And my first solo book came out 2 weeks after Colombia went into full lockdown. So all the
Mhm.
work had already happened, and I was recording my audiobook on the day before and sort of the weekend in between was when Colombia just went and I was like halfway through recording the book and I was like, I don't know if there's gonna be another day. Am I gonna be allowed out of the house to finish this book? And I was able to. Um, And I've shared elsewhere about how reading out loud is my greatest fear. It is a childhood struggle brought to life, and I got to torment myself for hours. But that torment, that like as an adult, a grown person reliving and being recorded while I'm doing this, reliving like deepest childhood fears, was so profoundly, amazingly transformative. I was like, oh, I can do this. I think it sounds terrible still, but other people listen to the audiobook and they're like, that was so soothing and that was so helpful. And I'm so glad you did that thing. So there's something about the collapsing of what used to be important
Yeah.
that we don't have to, you know, there's still people who are, or the voices are like, I want to go back to the way it was. And I was like, well, that's gone. Like it's forever gone. There will be something else later, but that, I hope, is actually forever gone. There were things that there's still so many things that shouldn't be. And in this microcosm and the sort of the deep looking that we get to see is we're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, there's some really important things that need to continue to change. We are nowhere near done. Let's please never go back. Um, and we're now in Colombia, at least, we're 13 and a half months in. My daughter's been to school for 7 days. In that whole 13 and a half months, we're back in a lockdown. Like there's no school anymore. She got to go to 7 days in March, in the whole
Wow.
month. And then we had like the spring break Easter situation, and we are home. We are home. Um, but the container really allowed me to decide what was important. It allowed me to focus on learning the things that I didn't know how to do, which was how to publish a book. How
Yeah.
do I do this? Right? I'm going to dive in. I'm going to roll up my sleeves. I'm going to get dirty. And that allowed for me to publish 2 solo books last year, contribute to 3 other books.
Hmm.
A year ago, just over a year ago, I didn't consider myself an author. And now I very much consider myself an author. And my bar of what I think that I'm capable of is so significantly different. And yet I know that it can keep changing, right? And the fact that the bar can move is the most exciting thing.
It's so amazing to me how many parallels there are between our, lives.
This is why
Uh,
we're friends.
yeah, exactly. But it's really remarkable. Like I didn't know you at all before a few months ago, and yet here we were, like living parallel lives in different countries. Uh, but it's just so cool to hear, that validation of my own experience,
Mm,
to say, yes, like that is exactly what this was for me too, that it was an opportunity to reevaluate all my priorities and
yeah,
say, are any of these things that I used to consider important and essential,
yeah,
important or essential?
right.
Turns out most of them no. Most of them
And they
no.
may have been once,
Mhm.
right? Like they may have been when they originated in your story,
Right.
but it can change. And I think we need these constriction opportunities
Yeah.
to like sort through. It's like, is this important now?
Yeah.
And just because it's not important now doesn't mean it wasn't vital once.
Right.
But it's like my house is full of clutter, right? Like full of things that were treasures when they arrived.
Yeah.
And now the treasure sort of has worn off, and it doesn't mean it wasn't valuable. I can toss it with love and say like, thank you for whatever joy you brought me once, but it's not bringing the joy anymore. And so clear some space. And maybe that's clearing space for a new thing to enter, or just the joy of the space, right? The
Yeah.
joy of the quiet, the joy of the simplicity.
Duration is not a test of truth.
Mm. This is so true in so many things, but we've learned in so many ways the opposite, right?
Yeah.
If we don't like change, we don't like endings, and we rarely pause and say like, how do you feel about your divorce, or how do you feel about losing your job, or how do you feel about your house burning down? Like it's always just like, oh, I'm so sorry. But
Hmm.
like, what if that was a good thing?
Yeah.
What if you needed that collapse or a pandemic? What if you needed things to get limiting so that we could digest?
I actually had a great conversation this morning with a friend who's going through something right now, and I won't get into the details because, she's not here to give her permission. However, I will say what I've been trying to help her through is just this idea that that breakdowns are bad things, right? A
Yeah.
breakdown can lead to a breakthrough. And sometimes when you are the catalyst for somebody else's breakdown, that can feel really awful.
Mhm.
But in retrospect, often those people are like such treasures to us that they came into our lives at the right time to help us transform in the
Yeah,
way that we needed to transform.
because we weren't ready to do it ourselves, or we needed that uncomfortable push, or yeah.
Exactly. And so often we try to control other people's experience of us, and it is always a disaster.
And it's limiting to them because so a couple of years ago, my very first public speaking event, I gave a talk called The Breakdown Through.
Uh-huh.
Breakdown, breakthrough, they are not two separate things. They are two parts of one experience
Yeah.
that you have to break down in order to break through. That we all want the breakthrough without the breakdown, and we
It doesn't work
resist,
that way.
but we resist the breakdown. Like you said, we control other people's experiences of us, and by doing so, we're actually preventing their growth,
Yes.
trying to keep them comfortable, and we're not allowing them to fall apart. Then we're preventing their inevitable arrival. They'll get there eventually. Like it's gonna happen. If it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. But we are delaying that natural growth. Um, doesn't Knowing that does not make any part of it better. In the moment, it's still completely agony and uncomfortable, and all the emotions. But for me, I say it puts parentheses around the experience. So instead of just feeling like it's gonna be that way forever and ever, it's got a shape to it. Like it does have a beginning and it does have an end. And it's like, okay, this will make sense or fit or be what it needs to be somehow. And the concept of a breakdown through allows for me, and when I share this with clients and audiences, it's like, oh, okay, where we've been holding ourselves back from the breakdown, trying to avoid the falling apart or the breakup or the loss. We don't want that. But the more that we pull back from that, then that breakthrough is still just further and further away. And so I'm like, rush towards it. If you feel it's something collapsing, congratulations. Like, go dig in, because just a little bit further is that thing that you've been hoping for. Don't spend too much time in the breakdown. Keep going. Don't resist it. Just like swim towards whatever's the hard part.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think we have a tendency when we find fear to run the other way when that is exactly the opposite of what we need to be doing. As soon as you find fear, that's actually a great indication that you're on the
we're
right track.
on the right track. Yeah.
Fear is telling you, if you're scared, you care. So fear means this matters to you. This is important to you. So keep going in
Yeah.
this direction. There is treasure in this
Yeah.
hole.
Well, so this reminds me of a quote I included in my first book by Joseph Campbell, and it's long and it's drawn out and it's beautiful, but it sort of condenses to the like the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear. I think it's actually more in like
Yeah,
um, in in the in the cave you fear is the treasure you seek. It's more poetic, but
love it.
basically, I that is what we've been talking about in just a couple of words. And so, like every time we want to put on the brakes, exactly, it's like, ooh, what's in there? Like, um, and for that to be possible, we do need to have a sense of safety, right?
Hmm.
To be willing to explore that fear or go towards the pain, we do have to have a sense of confidence or comfort within ourselves, a safe space physically, or people that we trust. You know,
Hmm.
there's a lot of talk about just like face your fears, and if you're not safe, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So, but be learning to be safe so that you can get the treasure. Um, go into that terrifying space, come back out with a lifeline, with something valuable. Um, and there's lots of ways to create that safety, right? There's internal relationship ways. There's how do you build a network of people who've got you, who can hear you through your weepy, mucusy, gross, whatever emotional experience, and not judge you for it, and not stab you in the back with it later, but like who can just be like, yeah, I got you, I hear you, I've been there, let's do this. Um,
Yeah, support is absolutely essential. I always like to say, people say, um, what that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And I say, that's only true if you have the resources to heal afterwards. Otherwise, it just weakens you and makes
yeah,
you more vulnerable
yeah,
to
yeah,
similar traumas in the future.
yeah. No, and I think that's another a gem that's come out of the pandemic is
Mhm.
um, being really intentional about who and how we spend time with each other. We are friends because we live in different countries, right? And without the pandemic, maybe we wouldn't have all needed to connect with different people in these ways. I met someone yesterday from Finland and we're friends now. And like, that would never have happened if I'd had enough social connection because of my coffee shop friends and my neighbors and my this. We needed that connection. We needed that safety, and encouragement and that bond. And we're fortunate enough not to live in 1918, the first time something like this happened, or the recent time. We have the internet and we can build these bonds across time and space in ways that weren't possible before.
So you've managed to mine some really wonderful things from the pandemic. You have discovered your author self, right?
Um,
You have created an amazing network of support for yourself. You have created a business that is giving back not just to you, but to other women who
yeah,
need to tell their
especially.
stories, who need to find those stories and tell those stories. Tell us a little bit more about what you've done with those gifts and how you're giving back now.
Quite honestly, I will have to own probably squandering those gifts from time to time.
Sure.
Every time I do, actually, though, I come back a little stronger. You know, every time I get lost in my own journey, um, the benefit of the work that I do and what I've taught and now have really fully integrated is that I can have a breakdown through that's pretty condensed. What I it doesn't The introspection and the self-awareness doesn't avoid those obstacles, but it sort of accelerates the journey through the obstacle. Um, so what used to take 3 months or 3 years can take less than 3 weeks. Sometimes I've had like the breakdown throughs in like 3 hours. I like felt it coming. I was like, oh, I know exactly what's happening. Let's do this. Took a nap and I was like, oh, okay, next. Um, So not always, but certainly more often than not, accelerating um, accelerating personal growth, professional growth in the face of the obstacle, like recognizing, hey, obstacle, thank you for coming. You are here to challenge me, right? That, and I spent easily all of my 20s and a good part of my 30s seeing an obstacle and going the other way and
Yeah.
putting all of my energy to not deal with that obstacle in any of the many ways that I could. Um, so your question exactly was how am I using the gifts?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so my daughter's 6. A lot of my analogies are 6-year-old analogies. Um, if our gifts from last year were toys, then I got to play with them for a while and I had a lot of fun with my toys. And now I want to share my toys with other people. I want to let them play. I want to let them learn and imagine all that they can. Um, and that my joy comes from other people playing with my toys. There's probably an adult way to say that, but,
I like it. I love it. I mean, you know me, I think play is so important for any age. And I
yes.
don't think we spend enough time playing or thinking about
Oh, hell
what
no.
makes it, what brings us fun and joy. So I
Right.
love that analogy. So let's look at tell us a little bit more about how you're sharing those toys. What have you created?
Yeah. Um, because even when I try not to be a teacher, I'm a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I my motivation was I wanna help people publish their stories, right?
Yeah.
But immediately I saw all the obstacles to even women who's never a woman who's never had her voice acknowledged to herself or by anybody else, like what is preventing her from raising her hand even to let me help her, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so the emotional part, your story matters. Your voice has value. You have a right to speak. Like, okay, huge. And then the how. How do I write something? How? I don't know how to write. Like, how do we coax our own story out of ourselves? Um, and so I've participated in a lot of different publishing situations, and the thing that was missing from them was the how to write, if
Mm-hmm.
I don't already know how, and and the
Yeah.
community that holds that container safe as you navigate the emotional part of what if the doubt and the I've never said this to anyone, and yet I'm like putting it on paper and it feels too real sometimes for even me to acknowledge that this is my truth. But when one person does that in a group and everybody says, I'm so glad you said that because it's true for me too.
Mm-hmm.
And that person says, I thought I was the only one, but like my bravery and my willingness to admit this raw hole inside of me just empowered this whole group of people. Like for me, it's like an atomic impact of rawness, but growth. And then we create that sense of permission.
Yes.
So taking the logistics of writing, some actual tools to help people. I mean, there's so many blocks, right? Writer's
Oh, yeah.
block. So, like, what's the antidote to this block and what's the antidote to that block, um, logistically, but then the emotional container too, so that we're doing both together. So, I've crafted a 29-day writing process,
Mm-hmm.
especially for women.
Yeah.
A lot of what's published and a lot of what's taught about writing and publishing is for men and from men and masculine and write 3,000 words a day and you'll reach this goal on a certain thing, and women are more fluid and sometimes want to write for 18 hours and then for 3 or 4 days don't want to write at all, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if the story is you didn't write for 3 days, there's something wrong with you,
Yeah.
then you're not going to write for 3 to 10 more days because you're dealing with there's something wrong with you. But what if there's nothing wrong with you and you're supposed to rest? And that's
Yep.
part of the process, right? Um, so, really loving creating a creative container that's just much more feminine, um, and it gives us permission for all the stuff. And then at the end of that, what people choose to do, it is, I can't even tell them what it is, and they won't know because they're not there yet. But when they get there, then it's like, well, what is this? How do I want to share it? Um, and so the publishing side, there's a self-publishing school so that a woman is teaching other women how to navigate, like which button to click, and here are all the choices you need to make, and here's how to make that right choice for you in this circumstance, um, as well as multi-author books, like
Mhm.
write a short piece and
Yeah.
collaborate together, and together we're all gonna market this book. And because we're all marketing this book, then it's reaching so many people. And you shared your story and she shared her story. And now there's a community of voices. It's a chorus, right? It's not just one um, one voice. So, and there's some other projects. There's like a writer's workshop, a writer's retreat, and yeah, there's lots of little things brewing. But the core of it is finding your voice, um, knowing that you have the right and the value to offer. And you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about, transforming one's experience into a story.
Yeah.
And you need to sort of wrestle and dig and excavate an experience to find what are the lessons, what are the gems. Um, a lot of experience, we write the morning pages. A lot of it's just junk,
Yep.
right? And nobody wants to read someone else's diary, right? Like
Right.
I don't care what you need to buy at the grocery store tomorrow. Like nobody cares. But if you can condense and massage an experience into a story, which is totally different, then it has value and meaning that you've crafted, and then you hand it to someone, and then they take it and read it and interpret it and integrate it to who they are, even if their interpretation is different than your interpretation. It like takes on a life of its own, um, but can speak forever. And I was just reflecting, I think in the middle of the night last night, a book, a physical book. I have some books that I've had that were printed in the 60s that I read in the 80s that I'm now reading to my daughter in the whatever decade we're in anymore. And the physical book is old as some of the pages are falling out, the spines are cracked, but the story was crafted and shared and still is as potent and has all the same gems to share as it did the day it was published. And while I love live storytelling and conversation and connection, there's something really enduring about something once it's published,
Yeah.
um, that will last longer than the woman who crafted it in the first place, um, and can reach so many more people. It's like the amplification of a soul. So
I love that. I mean, I love that because, this is all so in line with what I'm trying to create as well. And so I'm so blessed to have met you and to have you in my life and to be collaborating on this is just so exciting to me too.
yeah,
I
likewise.
want to talk a little bit more about, you were saying that everyone has a story. Everyone's story matters. I want to go into that a little bit more because I think that is the biggest block is just believing that your story is powerful, useful, interesting to anyone but yourself. Now, yeah, nobody wants to read your diary about like I had this weird dream last night. My hair fell out. But here's the thing. A lot of people have had a dream where their hair fell out, and that emotional arc of that experience can actually be told in such a way that it feels universal. That
Right.
even the weird specifics of your experience can resonate with somebody else who had a completely different experience
Yeah.
just because of the emotional echo, the emotional sort of energy around that experience for you. And so one of the things that I think is my primary job, as a story midwife or a creation coach or whatever the heck you want to call me, is just to help people find the universal emotional arc
Mm,
in their personal experiences.
yeah.
How do you feel like I completely understand that yes, you need that emotional piece and you need the logistic
Yeah.
piece. How do you help people navigate finding that emotional arc without getting caught up into
Mm,
that emotional arc and then feeling stuck or trapped by the
yeah.
emotions that were there originally?
I I love that question. There's so many things that I want to share, and I'll try to pick and choose. But um, until we've digested our own experience, we're not in a place to share it
Right.
in the way that we want to be sharing in this context. Um, and that's why I love morning pages, and that's why I love women's circles, and that's why I love, a lot of experiences need to be cycled through multiple times, and that's
Mhm.
why we don't publish first drafts.
Right.
Like, even
Writing
once it gets written
writing.
down,
Yeah.
right? Even once it gets written down, chances are it's been digested a few times, right? We run it through all of our various digestive systems,
Yeah.
emotional and psychological, and we talk it through with a friend, or and then we write it down, and then we write it down again, and then we tear it to pieces and we put it back together,
Mhm.
and then we revise it. And my second book, I think I probably reread it like 27 times. Maybe I'll never read it again, but like I was I was trying to understand my own experience. That's the process,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of people new to writing get stuck at the very beginning because they're like, this isn't very good. I'm like, that's not supposed to be good yet. It's supposed
It's
to be out, right? Get it out. And good, you and I have talked about good.
oh,
Good
yeah.
is not, it's not for us to decide good. But if we can't get past this isn't what I think it's supposed to be right now,
Mhm.
it'll never be what it could be. Um,
Can we talk about the messy middle?
yes, let's talk about the messy middle. But I also want to say, so we digest our experience for ourselves on the page itself in the revision process, which is usually a really solitary experience. But what I'm loving doing is bringing the woman circle experience plus the writing experience together
Together.
so that it's not, I mean, writing can feel so lonely and isolating, and it is you processing your own experience. But how do we know the emotional arc, and how can we sort of get through the emotion is and to a point where we can share it freely without sort of like forcing our unresolved stuff on the reader is to share it in a space and hear what resonates. And you could, when you hear, yeah, me too, and oh my god, I thought I was the only one, and it like ripples through a group, and you're like, oh my god, because underneath the, I thought I was the only one, is this belief that we're separate, that I'm me and you're you, and what's happened to me couldn't relate to you because of whatever, right? But we
Y
are
you've
parts of
just
a whole,
yeah, you're
right?
just helping me realize so many things here. God, I mean, I really feel like this is kind of what's been missing for me as a book midwife, is that I
Mm,
didn't have a group to
yeah,
help people work through this. It's just me giving feedback, and I'm just one person with one opinion, you know? Certain things resonate with me, other things don't.
yeah.
The thing that I remember feeling most was the most beneficial about graduate school was actually having classrooms full of other people
Yeah,
listening to my writing and telling me what pops for them and what questions they
right.
have.
Because that's it, right? You're in a room of readers,
Yeah.
right? And even, and this is the thing, we're trained to look to a teacher, a guide, and teachers and guides are super helpful.
Yeah.
But there's a guide within,
Mhm.
and what when we're with a group of people, I think our differences can melt away,
Yeah.
right? Our commonality is what gets found when we're sharing truthfully, vulnerably, whether it's just a women's circle or a writing circle. When we're sharing our core, what ripples through the room is that common humanity, is that experience that everyone can relate to, no matter their age or, the divisions, are like, oh, yes, you know, maybe not that exact, but a parallel enough that, and that those are the things that people hang on to, right?
Yeah.
That didn't happen to me, but that is like this thing that did happen to me. And so I'm connected to that story. And yeah, the commonality that unites us is what, I mean, that's what stories are,
Yeah.
right? It's teaching about humanity. And coming back to your original question, if the stories that we're reading are not representative of the people alive on the planet, then our understanding of what it means to be human is it's an insufficient story.
Yeah. All right, let's transition here. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to take you into, because I know you are planning a retreat
Yes,
soon,
I am.
and I absolutely love retreats. So I want to take you into, we're going to uh, see and visualize the perfect
Mm.
retreat
Oh
in our
God.
minds. Perfectly imperfect, of course, right?
That is what perfect means. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So, oh, wait, very quickly, the messy middle. I
Yes.
wanted to just share this because this is something that I say so often to my clients, that when it's a mess and you feel like I don't see like the final product in here anywhere,
Yeah.
it just looks like a mess to me. I remind them that when a caterpillar goes into a
Oh,
chrysalis, it has to turn into goo,
complete.
absolutely unrecognizable goo, in
Yeah.
order to become a butterfly. So if you're seeing just a bunch of goo, then you're on the right track.
Yeah. If you're dark and you're scared and you feel like you're drowning in your own soup, you
Hmm.
are absolutely in the right space.
That's right.
Um,
You're in the messy middle, and that's exactly where you're supposed to be right now.
and that chrysalis, I mean, I get really geeky about plants and bugs and stuff. Um, the immune system of the caterpillar actually attacks its own cells that are trying to turn into a butterfly because it does not recognize itself. And if you've transformed yourself or written something, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm at war with myself. That is exactly, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something right. Keep on doing whatever the hell you have been doing because you are becoming something unknown to yourself,
Yeah.
but it's the right direction. I love the messy middle.
All right. All right.
Um, I hate being in it. I still hate
Yes,
being in it,
we
no
all
matter how
hate
much
it,
I know
but
it. But at least, again, it's the parentheses. It's like I'm falling apart on purpose.
yeah.
Like, keep going. Yeah.
All right. So let's do this. Why don't you close your
Okay.
eyes? All right. Let's breathe in some beautiful colored light. Ooh, mine was all rainbow and sparkly. What was yours?
Because I already know the location of my retreat, mine was warm salt air,
Mm,
bougainvillea, and brightly colored old stone walls.
gorgeous. All right. So you're already there. So let's
I'm
just
so there. You
put
want to
put
catch
put your
up?
hand right there on that stone wall.
Mm.
Breathe in that scent. And then turn around, because there's a whole group of women standing right behind you. What are they doing right now?
They are sweating. But they are also steeped, completely steeped in the most tangible, magical realism
Mm,
that I know of on the planet, where the continuity of time no longer makes sense because they are in the past, probably with Wi Fi connected cell phones, and horse hooves are clopping down cobblestone streets, and it could be any time and no time. And history is in the air. They are seeing stories coming alive in balconies that are quite literally just dripping in Bougainvillea, um, and the breeze through the plaza, and the trees, and the smells of fresh fruit,
Mm.
and they are connected to themselves, they are connected to one another, and they are connected to something that is so real, and yet it's real in the way that only they can bring to life.
Yeah.
It's like they're in tune with the stories that are constantly whispered on the breeze.
Yeah. Gorgeous. I love it. I can't wait.
Ugh, neither can I.
Oh, you are always so wonderful, and having you on here just energizes me in a way that I cannot even explain in words. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here.
No,
Please
a
tell
total joy.
all the people listening where they can find all the wonderfulness that you are creating, and hopefully I will be creating with you.
Yes, you will be creating with me. It's already in the breeze. Um, so I'm on Facebook, Sierra Melcher. Um, Integral Women Mentoring is my private Facebook group, and Red Thread Publishing is part of Integral Women. It is these missions are so entwined that they couldn't help but be part of the same situation. And so Integral Women Mentoring on Instagram and Red Thread Publishing will sort of exist on Instagram, but I'm not trying to make extra work for myself. Um, but find me under those two things, hashtags and at symbols, and you know, but Sierra Melcher, Integral Women Mentoring, or Red Thread Publishing, I'm there. I got you, baby.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, my love.